Good evening everyone, and thank you for joining me. Guys, lots happening in the world at the moment, lots happening with the war front, so much stuff's happening, and it seems like we've lost track of this especially in the UK, in the media. It seems like nobody's reporting on this. So before we start this video, guys, okay, what we need to understand is a few things that's happening over in Ukraine, over in Russia, with the BRICS nations, and on a global, in the world. We've got powers moving and powers changing, and things that are happening now, it's just, you can see the writing on the wall, and I don't think there's not many people now who are looking at this objectively and saying, yeah, this is going to blow over, because guys, it's not going to blow over. What you've got to understand now is that and a lot of people don't understand this about the Russian economy. Right now, as I'm doing this video, the Russian economy is stronger. It's probably one of the strongest. It's probably the strongest it's ever been, certainly while Putin's been in charge. And it's certainly a lot stronger than it was before these sanctions were put on Russia. Now, Russia is so vast and huge, and it's an authoritarian state. So basically, you have to do what you're told. Now, Russia can print money, and Russia is in a war economy, and Russia have the resources and the trading networks, to continue moving forwards. So all these sanctions the West are putting on Russia, all it's doing, and this is not me saying it with no evidence to back it up. Literally, the sanctions that we've put on Russia have made it stronger, and that's the reality. And who's paid? We have at the fuel prices, we have with energy costs, with taxes. That's the reality, guys. You can't really argue that fact. Look at the Russian economy before sanctions. Look at the Russian economy now. Is it stronger? Yes. Okay, what's changed? The sanctions. There's no arguing in that, guys, all right? The sanctions that we've put on Russia have actually made Russia stronger. So what I want to do now, guys, quickly, guys, this is going to be I think this is going to be a long video. If you've not done so already, guys, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps us out when we do that. 30% of you don't watch these videos or don't like have not subscribed or whatever it is. So guys, we all talk about the Russian invasion in 2022, but obviously this started a lot. This has been going on for years. People could argue it started in 2013. People could argue it started in 2014, but we're going to start this, just the overview from December 2023. So December 2023, guys, that's when, 1st of December, that's when, Russian forces launched 25 Shahed drones into Ukraine and one Kinzhal 59 missile. So what you see there is the Russians starting to soften up targets, taking out key locations, testing their own weapon systems. Now, what you can do is you can make a comparison to what NATO, I don't want to say NATO because it's Ukraine who's doing it, but Ukraine are heavily backed by NATO. Right now you've got this prelude to the air war that's going into Ukraine with, the Ukrainians targeting Russian radar systems, Russian air defenses, but we'll come on to that later. So we can argue that this started from 2020, 1st of December 2023. And then you've got the main invasion on 24th of February 2022. And, things escalated so quickly. The mass exodus of people from Ukraine, the constant fighting, the political posturing. No, if you remember where you were at that time, can you remember how wild it was, guys? All right. One of the reasons for starting this channel was this was all happening. I was trying to deal with stuff myself, and my mum came to the where I live, there's like a driveway and you can't get up until somebody opens the gate, and my mum phoned me and I went down, I opened the gate. She came in, my mum, she was crying, she was petrified, you know, she didn't know what was happening. She had 2 Aldi bags, one was full of tea bags and long life milk, and the other was full of chunky soup, you know, and that's absolutely brilliant. But, you know, my mum she was terrified. And the situation that we are now in the world is a lot more dangerous than that was. The only thing is, we've normalized these things that are happening. We've normalized the, you know, the reality of the situation, which it's just getting worse. Back then, we had a situation where if NATO would have moved fast, you know, deployed troops, there'd probably be no Russia now. There wouldn't. But the reality is, you know, we were looking, we were kind of doing the, you know, Britain was doing the old British politicians thing. Every politician was going, oh, I don't want to touch this, I might get burned. But what happens is, because of lack of leadership early on, these things just escalate, they get worse, people, there's losses on both sides. And we are where we are now, where Russia is a lot more powerful than it was before the invasion. And that's just the reality of the situation. You know, so that's kind of the context for this video. So it's come out then in the UK that there is an army of women in the UK preparing for, you know, these events that are up and coming, that are, you know, that are likely to happen at some point this year. Now, I'll put, obviously, for all these articles I'm talking about, guys, I'll put the links in the description so you guys can go check them out yourself, and you know I'm not waffling. So yeah, there's an army of women preppers in the UK who are preparing for all these events. You know, they're doing, and you know, the article says, you know, a lot of people have got emergency plans and family. In the military, you'd call them standard operating procedures, but they're just emergency plans for these, you know, for these families, in such that, you know, what are you going to do if a situation happens? Where are you going to go if you're at work? Where are you going to go if you're out shopping? Where's the family going to meet up? You know, and they've rehearsed this with their children, and I think that's good practice, guys. All right, you don't have to do this as like you know, something with a lot of solace. You can have a little bit of fun with the kids, messing about, playing. You know, they don't need to know it's dangerous, or they don't need to know, depending on how old they are. All they need to know is you can pretend they're goblins coming. You can pretend it's you know, aliens or something. But we need to start educating people and understanding what could be potentially down the lines. You know, do you have supplies? Do you have you know, a lost communications procedure? Because how many times, I think this year, yeah, how many times this year has the internet gone off? And of course, they're never going to say it's a cyber attack. They're never going to say they've been hacked. But the reality is, these you know, these large telecommunications companies, they will be under constant attack. You know, and they will have to thwart these attacks. And when these attacks get through, the internet goes down from that provider. Now, the reason they're never going to tell you that they've been hacked is because, I don't know, say Raven Mobile gets hacked. I'm never going to tell you guys that I've been hacked, because what's going to happen? All you guys are going to cancel your subscriptions because I've been hacked, and you're going to think, oh, I'm not going there if I lose my internet. And that's the reality. So none of these companies will ever come out and admit that they've been hacked, or they've been, you know, or anything like that's happened, because they'll lose so much money. So as an overview, guys, what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, you know, there's still heavy fighting, and nobody's talking about this. There's still people right now in trenches with tanks rolling, Grad missiles, rockets, artillery firing on each side. You know, it's absolutely crazy. Neither side, to me, looks like, neither side are backing down at all. You know, if anything, they're ratcheting things up. You know, I've said all along that Kharkiv is going to be a key city. I think that's going to be the next focus of, you know, the Russian attacks. I think they're going to do this pincer movement, and they're going to try and encircle it. You've also got the added, you know, the added complexities now, I say complexities, the added dimensions with the air war that's about to start. And guys, the air war is about to start. I don't care what anybody says. You know, look what's happening. You know, all these F-16s that are being promised. You've got the Ukrainians targeting the early warning systems, the air defences and all that. There is an air war coming. But also what we need to do is look at the perception, especially if you live in the UK, look at the perception from Russia. You know, the UK is 100% a legitimate target now. There's no way we can back out of that, whether we've got a Labour government, whether we've got a Tory government, whether we've got, you know, Nigel Farage and Reform leading. It doesn't matter. The UK is 100% a legitimate target. What people don't understand is, and I think people kind of pay lip service to it, some of the Russian equipment. Now, one of the pieces of equipment that I think they may even already have it here is something called the it was called System 6. I think it's called Poseidon. It's basically a nuclear weapon drone submarine. Can you imagine such a thing? So it's basically an unmanned submarine with a nuclear bomb in it. Guys, it's absolutely wild. And the theory behind this is they would navigate this up to an enemy's shores. They would do it very, very slowly so it's undetectable. They would get that as close as they can to an enemy's, an enemy's coast, and then they would detonate it. You know, that can be anywhere with a beach. Remember, the UK has a fair few beaches. They're not warm and they're not particularly nice, some of them, but we are literally an island, all right? So when you think about Midland UK, I think from coast to coast, it's what, 80 miles or something? One at each side could pretty much, well, it could cause a lot of damage to the UK. Now, if we contrast this as well, and I've got to give both sides of these arguments, you know, nuclear weapons, so that's the delivery system. The nuclear weapon itself, you know, a lot of these weapons are very, very old. They need servicing. I always talk about servicing, and it's all well and good, you know, saying you've got this new piece of equipment and how awesome it is, and you've got 1,000 of these and 1,000 of those, and I say, okay, who's servicing them? Who's maintaining them? Who's got the have you got a steady supply of parts? The company that supply the parts, have any of them gone bust? Do they still make that part? You know, so there's a whole industry around these, just keeping them operational. You know, they need upgrading. The fissionable material that's inside these nuclear devices, you know, they degrade over time. That's what they do. So, you know, whereas you've got some, and I know there's different stabilities. But you know, over time these things will degrade. It's what they do. So, you know, what you can see there is, will these things actually work? And I think, and I've said this a few times, excuse me, I think, and I have said this a few times, that I think one of the main reason that, you know, we've not seen at the moment, we've not seen tactical nuclear weapons launch, we've not seen this escalation go as far as it could, is because I think each side, you know, everybody understands that their nuclear fleet or their nuclear weapon system is not as good as they're pretending it is. And remember when Grant Shapps was on the nuclear submarine, and and he said, "Right, guys, show them. Let's show these Ruskies what we can do." And the missile went, woo! Can you imagine that if you were about to launch a nuclear attack on a country and your nuclear weapons didn't go off, they didn't work, they broke, or only one of them went off? You know, it wouldn't be good. So I think all countries are holding back. If you look back to the October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, literally every couple of days there was a nuclear missile test. The Russians had tested something, the Americans had tested something. Then and so they were showing each other that they had the capacity. Until that happens, I'm not convinced on this nuclear threat. I am 100% convinced on the conventional threat and 100% convinced on the soft targets and the civilian soft targets, and 100% convinced on escalation, and that more countries are going to be dragged into this conflict. But guys, you know, there's lots of sea-based systems, you know, at the moment, but I don't see the main threat from Russia coming from conventional navies. I see it coming from civilian vessels, and I've said this so many times. I think we're going to see a new phase of warfare called, you know, asymmetric naval warfare, and it's gonna, you know, and it's just gonna change. It's gonna change a lot of dynamics. Those are, again, you know, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, your insurgents, they're wearing civilian clothes, they're using civilian vehicles. It's very hard to target them. It's very hard to attack them. And I feel, you know, our adversaries are going to use this model in the seas, in the oceans. Now, again, we can come on to Antarctica, the Falklands, the oil that's been found there, and we can encompass all that into the same bracket, you know. But it's all part of that same, you know, that same naval. I mean, look at the Russian shadow fleet. You know, I've spoke about this before. You know, the UK has recently done sanctions to try and sanction and stop the Russian shadow fleet. They're pushing for what these sanctions are doing, guys. It's pushing these countries towards BRICS. It's pushing all these countries that are using shadow fleets, that are operating within that sphere. It's just pushing them all towards BRICS, because people are thinking, okay, why am I going to trade with the US dollar if you can sanction me? If I trade with the BRICS nations, which is growing and growing and growing, these guys can't sanction me, because the way that the BRICS is set up is you use your own currency for trade between nations. So if you're using your own currency, you can't, you know, you kind of can't sanction them. You know, the UK has also sanctioned one of the largest Russian naval insurance companies. I think it's called Ingostrak or something. I may be slaying that word, guys. 5 Chinese companies as well that are linked to these shadow fleets have been, you know, that have been sanctioned. So you can see the lines here are starting to, well, they're already there, you know, but the lines are just getting thicker. So all this is happening, and this is all about the water at the moment, guys. I've not even started about the air or the land. So we haven't even seen the beginning of the naval warfare yet. But like I said, I think we'll see asymmetric naval warfare. Nobody's talking about it. I'm the only one who just spoke about it. I think guys, let me know in the comments if you've seen somebody else talk about asymmetric naval warfare. That's the way I feel we're going. So let's talk about the air situation then. The air war over Ukraine, the air war over Europe. You know, you've got Ukraine actively targeting Russian air defences. They are doing that 100%. Now, if you look back to when I started this video and I was talking about the prelude to the Russian invasion in 2022, you know, you had the Russians firing over, taking out key targets, strategic locations, you know, testing their systems, which is kind of what's happening now in Ukraine. You've got the Ukrainians firing into Russia, taking out radar early warning systems, taking out air defense systems, taking out Su-57s, and all this is happening. Why? Again, it comes down to when these F-16s get issued. You know, when are they going to get issued? Have they been issued already? We will find out soon enough. Where are they going to be flown from? I've said this for the longest time that I don't think they will ever be flown out of Ukraine. I think Poland is the, Poland is likely to be the main place that these F-16s are going to be flown from. Because remember what Ukraine said, I think it was the air minister or the Air Force guy, he said Ukraine may keep some F-16s abroad to stop them being attacked. Now guys, you know, this is a war, all right? If you're getting F-16s, they're going to be a target. If you keep them in another country, that other country is going to be a target. You know, let's just contextualize this with the Russian artillery. You know, above Kharkiv, the Russians were firing artillery into Ukraine. The Ukrainians didn't have the authority to strike back with NATO weapons, so they kind of could do that with impunity. The Ukrainians are kind of going to be doing the same thing if they're keeping their aircraft in, and again, it might not be Poland, but if they're keeping them in Poland, for example, they're doing the same thing. So the Russians can use the Western theory of deduction and say, oh, well, you attacked us in our country because we were firing into your country. You guys are flying the F-16s from Poland and attacking people, so we're just going to attack Poland. And guys, when is this going to be an Article 5 issue, and when are the gloves going to come off? Because I feel that things are just moving further and further forwards now, and really there doesn't look any legitimate way that people will stop firing. Furthermore, with the F-16s, Belgium came out and they said, hey guys, yeah, you know what, you can have some F-16s. Also, I think they said they could have 30, but now this is really interesting. The Belgians said the Ukrainians didn't have the authority to fly the F-16s over Russian mainland. Now, which is, you know, it's fine, it's their aircraft, they can do what they want. But is that a tacit agreement that the other F-16s have been cleared to fly inside Russian airspace, that they can fly deeper inside Russia and do, you know, offensive sorties inside mainland Russia? Or are they just going to be, you know, flying over Ukraine? The reality is we don't know at the moment. I think this will come out later on. But now look at this as perception. Imagine if you was a Russian living in one of those border towns, you know, and I know what some people will be saying, oh, but the Russians, they're their enemy. But most of these people in these border towns in and around Russia, especially people that live out in the countryside, they don't care about this war. They want war less than anyone else. They just want to get on with their lives, you know. But now they're living under the, under the threat of an F-16 coming over and dropping ordnance all over the place. And when you do that, that drags those people into the war. And those people who were neutral, who didn't want anything to do with it, they start to say, right, well, let's go and attack them. And you see how things escalate and escalate and escalate. You know, it's just, there really is, I really don't think there's any ways to back down now. The Russians have already said with these F-16s that they're ready and they're capable to take out the airfields that they fly from. Now, whether that be in Ukraine, whether that's in Poland, they have the capacity. Now, will they do that? Because I think everybody knows if they take out an airfield in Poland or in somewhere else, you know, what is NATO's response going to be? You know, are they going to say, oh, well, actually, that airfield, we gave that to Ukraine, so that's actually Ukrainian land. You know, like something like that, some sort of like smoke and mirrors where they get out of it. So guys, I may be slaying this word. There's an airfield in somewhere called Dolginsevo. I may be killing that word, guys. But basically, that's an airfield that is being attacked by Russian Lancet drones. And, you know, a lot of Ukrainian jets there have been destroyed. So, you know, we know they've got the capacity. We know they've got satellites. They've got their own ISR platforms. They can conduct these operations, as we can see. So this is why I just don't think the F-16s are ever going to be flown from Ukraine. They may fly like a couple and just as a sacrificial lambs, but I think the main fleet of F-16s is going to be from Poland. Because then it becomes very dark, it becomes very murky. How are they going to get those F-16s from Poland to Ukraine? They're going to fly them. Okay, so how can anyone tell if that aircraft that's just flying into an airbase to do a sortie from an airbase is going to do an offensive mission? It becomes really difficult. And when they fly them back for servicing, where they're going to get serviced? Probably not Ukraine. So they're saying, this one's damaged, we're going to fly that back for servicing. You know, so they've got this tacit deniability where they can argue that, oh no, that plane wasn't going on an offensive mission, it was just flying back to Poland for a service. And then they can say, oh no, that aircraft wasn't going on an offensive mission, that aircraft was just coming in because we've got an aircraft damage and that one was replacing it. So you see, they're laying these seeds for, to murky this water for the air war that's coming. And, the air war is about to begin, and we've also had Russian bombers in, I believe, in NATO airspace, and I think the Swedish had to scramble some fighters. Again, this air war, this air campaign, I think it is imminent. I think you'll see more increases in the ground war, and then I think the naval war, that might come at the end of the year, maybe early next year. So what's happening on the ground? You had Putin's ceasefire deal. Anybody who's looked at what Putin's ceasefire deal was, guys, it just sounds like surrender. I've got to be fair and objective. If Putin came out and he said something like, okay guys, I will move out of the regions that were pre-2022 Ukrainian borders, and I will rebuild those areas. In return, Ukraine recognised Crimea as Russian territory. That's an example, guys. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying if it was something like that as an example, that would have been, a legitimate, negotiation to say, withdraw your troops, leave us where we are, and we'll call a ceasefire. That's kind of a surrender. That's not really that's not really a negotiating tool, because when you're negotiating, you have to give something. Each side has to concede something, and then they work together from the middle. They work together to find a middle ground. But this ceasefire deal that Putin said, it wasn't a ceasefire deal at all. But he can say to the BRICS nations, he can say to China, he can say to India, to South Africa, to Saudi Arabia, look guys, I'm trying to do a peace deal, but these guys are not listening. So, you've got to understand how these things work. And everybody I've spoke to in Ukraine, they've all said, when Putin starts talking about peace deals, that means he's about to escalate. And I think it's right, guys. I think next week we're going to see an escalation. It may be after the 4th of July, but we don't know. Things are happening so quickly now. Ukraine, they've even started recruiting people from prisons now. Can you just conceptualize that for one moment? Wherever you are in the world, conceptualize that you're under attack and your military is going to prisons and recruiting people to go and fight. I remember watching, and I can't remember what the movie was called. It was some like old war movie with my granddad. Dirty Dozen? It might be the Dirty Dozen. I think it is the Dirty Dozen. It's got the guy with the bald head. And he goes into the prison and he recruits these, recruits these criminals. And I just remember thinking, when I was little, I was thinking, oh yeah, that'd never happen. That's ridiculous. This is far-fetched. This is a far-fetched, 60s film or whatever. But we've actually got that now in Ukraine. We had that in Russia, So you can see how much manpower this war is churning up. And here in the West, we are not ready to accept or even contemplate these numbers of loss. When things get this bad and you're having to do that, who knows what's happened? Who knows how many people they've lost? Who knows who's lost what? But you've got to look at the things that are actually happening, and they're actually going to prisons now and trying to recruit people. So that's the reality. On the ground then in Ukraine right now, as we are today, there's heavy fighting near Chaziv Yar, which is west of Bakhmut. The Russians are really close to cutting off the main supply route. Now, in these conflicts, the ground isn't as important as the access routes, because if you control the access routes, by default, you control the ground. So the access routes are key for resupply, evacuation, reinforcements. And once you start cutting these, access points, access and egress, that's when you start to really control these areas and these locations, because, the fields, that sort of stuff doesn't really matter. There's nothing of strategic importance in there. You know, once you can control the access points, then you can start controlling the utilities. Then you can start dictating what happens in that place. And right now, as we are, you know, the Russians are really close to cutting off that supply road. That supply road into Chasiv Yar. So that is what's happening on the ground at the moment. You know, there's a feeling when I speak to people out there that this escalation is going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. So remember now, guys, all right, when we're talking about these escalations, these all, remember what we said previously, that this fits into this July, August, maybe a little bit later. These timings are fitting together absolutely perfect. And we're sat here in the UK and nobody seems to be talking about this anymore. I hope, well, I don't hope, but I think what will happen next week, or when this next escalation happens, people will really start to drill down this. You remember what like a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago or something, when it came out in the news that, you know, people in the UK need to prepare for a national emergency, a national crisis. But they didn't tell us what it is. They just thought, guys, you know, I'm in my 40s now, and I've never once heard the government tell everybody that they need to have, what did they say? Like 3 days of water and all the rest of it. Never in my life have I heard that, and I don't think anyone will have, unless, I mean, maybe even in the Cold War they didn't do that. So if you look back through my videos, guys, look back at the top 10 civilian soft targets I did. I said that, you know, and I've highlighted them, and I'm standing by them because I think they're solid. You know, we've got the threat of this, you know, these Poseidon nuclear weapons, which I think are the most. If Russia is going to use a nuclear weapon on the UK, I think that's the most likely one. It's slow, it's easy to, by slow, I mean if it moves slow under the ocean, under the sea, it's very hard to detect. You know, with the ground movements, you know, it's really hard for these things to, it's really hard for them to be detected, so it's really easy for them to get close to the shore. You know, we've got the potential, the UK, and nobody else is talking about this. We've got the potential for the UK to be fighting a conflict now in Ukraine and the Falklands again. Nobody's talking about the Falklands, but look at the oil. Look what we just spoke about Russia's dark fleet, Russia's oil capacity, how they're trading oil, and the BRICS nations are getting stronger and stronger and emboldened. So that's the reality. I think if Britain commits itself into Ukraine with boots on the ground and tanks and infrastructure, then, you know, the Falklands will become a hot point again, because Britain's already committed. So remember what they said then, guys. The emergency preparedness, emergency crisis thing in the UK. You know, they said you need to be ready. You need to have 3 days food and water. I can't remember which one of these happened first. But remember what they said about this 3 days thing. 3 days food and water. Okay, fine. How long were people, when the Devon water thing happened, how long were people without water there? I think it was well over a week. Well over a week. You know, I want to say 2 weeks, but I'll go with a week, because it was definitely well over a week. Where are you going to get the rest of your water from? You know, I don't know why they're saying 3 days food and water. I'm hoping they're saying 3 days food and water so you get a lot more. But, you know, more is always better. This thing about less is more, no, more is more. More is always more. So, take the Devon water incident. Take the Devon water situation and think, okay, if that happened in 5 or 10 different regions in the UK, who would provide this water? Double that up with an attack, double that up with a cyber attack, throw in a electrical grid down system, and these are all on my civilians top, you know, my top 10 civilian targets. All these things could happen ridiculously easy, and they would be very cheap to do. A fraction of the cost of a Poseidon missile, you know, and whoever did that would have plausible deniability. Nobody could point the finger at anyone. One thing that people don't talk about a lot is heating, keeping warm, sleeping bags, fuel, cooking. you know, because the reality is, when you're in these situations, you know, it's all right thinking, you know, you've got your boil in the bag camping meal and you're going to eat it cold. That's fine. But a warm meal gives you so much morale. You know, I saw people in, when was it? Like 2003, I think. Yeah, I think it was 2003. We had like, when I was in the invasion of Iraq, we had lots of press living with us in the barracks, and they wouldn't eat the food and they wouldn't drink the water. They wouldn't drink the water because it was hot. We're in the desert, we had no way of cooling it, so every time you drank water, it was really hot. The food was, you know, military rations, and they wouldn't eat them, and they were just collapsing. And you know, I hear people saying, oh, if it was an emergency situation, I'd eat anything, I'd do anything. The reality is you would for a little bit, but then the monotony, you just stop doing it, you wouldn't do it. And that's the reality, guys, and I've seen that with my own eyes. What people don't talk about a lot either is, you know, so we've all in our homes now, we've got our what have we got? We've got our 3 days food, we've got a week food, we've got a week's water, we've got fuel, we've got, you know, we've got everything. We're ready for this. And then an emergency happens. Who's talking about workplace emergencies? Who's talking about contingencies for the workplace? You know, if there's one of these situations and you lose your job, who's going to pay your bills? Where are you going to get money from? You know, because guys, you'll still have to pay your mortgage unless the government step up and do something absolutely wild again, like they did before. And you know, we can go into that in depth at another time. But you know, what I'm trying to talk about here is job security. Do you have insurance for your job? Is there even a thing? You know, are you self-employed? Could you get by now if your job was over? Have you got a job in, you know, what are we looking at? Like industry, retailing, catering, you know, all these sectors. Because when these national emergencies happening, all these industries, every industry is going to be susceptible to crime, to looting, to theft. And are you ready if your company, your place of work, they just say, hey, listen, you know, we've had all our stock looted, you can't come in anymore and we can't pay you. Are you ready for that right now? Are you ready for, you know, all these sorts of things? Will your boss be asking you to come in? Will you still get paid? Have you even spoke to your boss about that? You know, and all these sort of things we need to take into consideration when we're looking forwards over this next year. Because guys, you know, there is no going back now, I don't feel. I don't feel this peace deal that Putin... He knew straight away when he said it. He was probably laughing about it. He's probably saying, no, they will never get it. It's ridiculous. Listen. I will actually say, I'll give them same terms of surrender. You know, and that's the reality of what it was. You know, the Ukrainians were never going to go for it because it wasn't a ceasefire negotiation. It was kind of a surrender deal. Guys, that is what I'm thinking at the moment. Let me know what you guys think. Have you stayed to the end? What have we been going? 37 minutes, guys. We have been going 37 minutes. That is powerful. Guys, I will see you guys tomorrow. I'm going to max a grid.